So if you've ever gotten a email from me, you might be aware that usually when I end my emails, I sign not sincerely or love or care or something like that. I always end it, or almost always end my emails with the line blessings, and then I put my name. I wanted to tell you where that came from and why I sign all of my emails with the word blessing, and also some of my thank you notes as well. It goes back to an experience I had many years ago when I had gone to a coffee shop because I was looking for a good place to study. I was in the midst of reading this book and I was trying to find that good spot to study, and it was too hectic in the office and it was too much at home. And so I went to this particular coffee shop that I knew was pretty quiet. And I found my spot. It was a great spot. I kind of isolated myself and I was there and I was ready to study. I opened my book, I started to read, and wouldn't you know it, there's a guy comes and sits down right across from me. Now, I didn't want to be rude or anything like that, so I kind of looked up and I acknowledged him. I kind of nodded my head, and when I did, he handed me this card. And the card said, "Hi, my name is Jim and I am deaf." Now, when I read that at first, I was a little bit concerned because I have had this experience before in the college that I had gone to, where there was a gentleman who was deaf, and he would hand us a card and then would ask us for a donation, and I really didn't want to get into that then. But anyway, this guy handed me this card, and I acknowledged him. I shook my head and waved, and then I saw he pulled out a pad of paper and he started writing something on it. And then he handed me the pad of paper, and I read it, and it said, "So tell me about the book you're reading." Well, the book that I was reading was a book that was called Roots of Who We Are by Roger Nishioka. He was the head of the Presbyterian Church's youth ministry, and he had written this book to talk about kind of the standards of youth ministry within the Presbyterian Church. And it was used to help students understand the origins of the Presbyterian Church. And so I explained that to him by writing it on the pad of paper, and I gave it back to him. And he read it, and then he wrote something and gave it back to me. And the question that he wrote on his pad of paper was, "How far back does it go?" And I wasn't completely sure what he was talking about, but I thought he meant how far back does this description of kind of who the Presbyterians are for these youth go. So I said, well, I mean, it goes back to what our Presbyterian Youth Ministry Council had as the standards for youth ministry. And I talked about how this youth council had put this together, and Roger had written this thing. And, I'd written that out to him, and I handed it to him, and he read that, and then he sent it back to me, and he said, "Not far enough. Don't you go back further? Doesn't your history go back further?" And I thought, well, I wasn't really sure what he was getting at, but then I thought, well, yeah, of course our history goes back further. I mean, it goes back, the Presbyterian history goes back to the theology of John Calvin. So I wrote, yeah, we trace our history back to John Calvin, and I handed it back to him. He looked at it and he read it. He wrote again, and he handed it back to me, and it said, "Not far enough. Don't you go back further?" And I thought, what is this guy getting at? So I said, well, absolutely. I mean, of course, we go all the way back to the teachings of Jesus. I mean, we use the scripture in the Presbyterian Church. We go to the teachings of Jesus and the apostles, and we look at those early teachings of the church. So yeah, we go back further. And I wrote that down there and handed it to him. He looked at it, and he wrote something. He handed it back to me, and he goes, "That's not far enough. Do your roots go any further than that?" Well, at this point, I really wasn't sure what he was trying to get at. And so I said, "Let me know what you're talking about. What do you mean by how far back does our church go?" So he wrote back and he goes, "Well, let me try to explain." And he opened his Bible to a particular passage and he handed it to me, and he pointed for me to read from this section of scripture. It was Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. And so I read those. "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and in you all families of the earth shall be praised and blessed. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. I read that passage of scripture and I handed it back to him, and he wrote something on here. He says, I suppose I could go all the way back to creation because that's how deep my roots go. But then he said, but I take my roots of who I am as a Christian back to this place, back to this passage of scripture where God for the first time addresses Abram and says that he is going to bless him. He is going to bless him and make his name great and make the family great. But then he says, so that you will be a blessing to others. So this gentleman kept writing, and he handed it to me, and I read. He says, this is the roots of who I am as a Christian. And this has become my calling that I see myself needing to do. I am blessed so that I can be a blessing. And that's what I try to do each and every day. I try to find a way that I can bless someone because of who I am in Jesus. You know, I've never forgotten that conversation I had with that gentleman. And that's why I write at the end of all of my emails and most of my correspondence, blessings. It's a reminder to me that that is truly the roots of who I am, that when God called Abram, he blessed him and made him great so that he would be a blessing. Not so that he could fill himself better than others. Not so that he could sit back in the luxury of his specialness. Not so that he could claim God's abundance for himself and himself alone. God blessed Abram and Sarah so that they would be a blessing to others. What a neat idea that this is what we are called to pass on. That our roots as people of God, as children of God, as disciples of Jesus, our roots go back to this very idea that we are blessed so that we can be a blessing. Well, it looks like I just got another email. So I'm going to respond to that email, but when I do, rest assured I'm going to end it with blessings. And my hope and my prayer is I'll find a way to be a blessing to someone else today. Thank you.